Continuing on from part 1, we make the mistake to decide to replace some dented frame rails. Located on the lowest part of the body, they are subject to speed bumps and other road hazards the previous drivers had found. Structurally, they probably did not need to be replaced, but emotionally, we would have known that they were dented, if that makes sense to you. Regardless, once removed, some rust was found. Unfortunately, the ordered frames did not fit. Too big by at least a 1/4 inch in height and about an 1/8 in width. I cut one of them down to fit and brought it to a local machine shop that they could make me an exact copy. Should I admit that I tried to weld the replacement frame to fit, but only proceeded in turning it into a banana with excessive heat? Oh well. Funny enough though, the machine shop charged me the same price, without knowing it, that I paid for the prefab rails. If this is something you need to do to your classic Spider, send me a note and I can walk you through it. Anyway, the guy who sold us the Fiat stopped by to check out our progress. He just finished restoring that '64 Vet. Pretty nice. And from there, it was on to cutting out more rusty bits and welding the replacement pieces. As always, practice and patience gets the job done. Inside the rear wheel well, remember how I mentioned in part 1 that the rotisserie was worth every penny? Before and after. Before, and after. Before, and after. Now the rear outer wheel well arches. The inner wheel well arches were in good shape, so all that was needed was to clamp and plug weld the ordered part. A weld-through primer and seam sealer should be able to protect both of these arches from rust for at least a few years. If this is also something you need to do, please send me a note and I can walk you through it. Again, it is easier than it could have been. The exterior wheel well arches weld-through primer on the inside. And with some panel adhesive, its curved lip attaches nicely to the outer wheel well. About a dozen-ish vice grips are used to clamp the pieces together until the adhesive cures. This will create a complete seal along that interior edge instead of water, etc. creeping into it if it was to be welded. The exterior wheel arch is then stitch welded to the quarter panel. We needed to add about a 1/4 inch piece into the length to the curve to fit the body lines at the base of the wheel well. This was a small error on our part in the initial placement of that outer wheel well. The other side fit perfectly. And the rotisserie. The underneath was rust-proof painted and undercoated. As well as the interior tub. Underneath the rocker panels, the engine bay, and the trunk. Why not? But what were we to do with this massive space behind the front wheel? It's a poor design and in need of a proper solution. Fiat welded a flat piece of metal and stuffed sealant and rubber to keep wet and dirt out, but only enough to risk corrosion. That said, we took a page from their book and custom fit a chunk of sheet metal to the opening, leaving enough room for weather stripping to fill the gap. Nutted tabs were welded to the curved interior piece, my weak welding skills surprising me with the result, that the flat panel is now bolted into place and removable to replace any weathered weather stripping. And it looks good too. Time for this front suspension. Remember, we started with this, went to this, and finished with this. Running some new brake lines underneath the car. And onto the rear axle. Rear suspension installed and off the rotisserie now. Remember, we started with this, went to this, and finished with this. So what's next? The rear brake calipers need to be installed, and well, an error on my part. When we installed the lower ball joints, I had my boys install them on the wrong side. You can see here that the ball joint is attached on the top of the lower A-arm. The flange needs to be underneath the A-arm with the ball joint poking through the hole. Otherwise, the only thing countering the massive spring pressure and the weight of the vehicle are 3 8mm bolts. This will be fixed and she'll be soon on all fours, ready for primer and paint.